So we were talking about the darkest phase of history. We're talking about Hitler's inordinate ambition, which had grown from his believe in, believe in the Aryan supremacy, from the Germans being superior, and of course his nationalistic politics, which had also contributed at large in making him think so. So he introduced these laws, as I've said, the Nuremberg laws and all, which denied the Jews of basic necessities, even basic necessities. And once he was prepared with arms, ammunitions, and one of the finest army, he decided to wage a war on entire Europe. It started with he conquering countries after countries falling to his dominance, to his ambition, to his lust and greed for more power, more territory, and more slaves. Austria, Poland, Czechoslovakia, France, all of them. And then it was turn for England. Well, there are many other countries which had surrendered without even fighting. And one of them is Netherlands. Well, there are so many. There are so many. In fact, Hitler had become by that time the master of Europe. He had found a new ally in Mussolini, Benito Mussolini, another dictator, another fascist from Italy. Fascist refers to fascism, where there would be one ruler and he would have the entire power to overrule what people would think or even ask for. And based on fascism, he would build a nation which would only serve the national interest. And in such a nation, there is no place for other people. So basically, fascism is more related to nepotism, jingoism, and of course racism. So these terms refer to what? These terms refer to hatred, oppression, and of course these were the reasons what have evoked war. So he had a new ally. Of course, I was talking about Mussolini, and together they were on a rampage. So Hitler, of course, he was growing in power, and he was becoming a complete racist with time. Result, the concentration camps, where the Jews were taken forcefully and were told to enter certain gas chambers on the excuse or the pretext of having a bath. So as they entered these concentration chambers, or gas chambers rather, naked, they ended up in dying through certain channels and pipes. The Germans would insert poisonous gases into this chamber, and those who would be there, they would die. Millions died. Millions were slaughtered, shot, killed, imprisoned, sent for exile. It was a terrible period. total human genocide, total Holocaust. In fact, if you go to Poland, till date there is a camp still there for tourist interest. This is at Auschwitz, and this is considered to be the most infamous concentration camp ever made by Hitler, where bodies were piled and burned and evidences were wiped off or eradicated. In fact, Hitler's mission was to eradicate the Jews from the surface of this earth. He had that much of hatred. Well, there is even a controversy that he was born of a Jewish father, and when he was a child, he was beaten down by his father most often. So even that had spurred up his anger, I must say. If that is a fact, of course it has. And there are so many reasons which we have already discussed about. So Hitler was fighting war, and he was actually obliterating the Jews from the surface of the earth. They were running helter-skelter for lives, but still, they were not safe. The story of Anne Frank happens to take place exactly in this darkest phase or period, where apartheid or racism had been in the extremist form, and people had been dying just because of one man and his ambition, inordinate ambition, his dream, his Aryan supremacy philosophy and ideology, his racism, his apartheid. Well, he is none other than Adolf Hitler, an omnipotent autocratic dictator on earth. Someone who thought that he would never die. The reason was there were more than 42 assassination attempts on him, and he survived all of them. And the worst one was the Valkyr conspiracy. There is a film on this. If you want to check, you can check in YouTube or in Google or whatever, on Google and whatever. Well, just imagine this man survived 42 assassination attempts. And that really shocks us. It's natural that such a man would think that he would never die because he had survived 42 attempts, 42 assassination attempts. There were conspiracies where people have plotted and planned to remove Hitler, and they have failed. So this was the time when the story of Anne Frank happened. In fact, if you read this book, from the Diary of Anne Frank, you would understand what I am trying to say. For in this book, she happens to present and portray and narrate and describe the worst phase in human history, the Holocaust. But remember, it's not just about Holocaust. There are lots of things what she had referred to. When you read her book, you find out how mature she is, though she was just a little girl, nothing else. When you read, you find out how good she had been as a writer, as an orator, as a speaker, and how better understanding this girl had about human psyche, human nature, human character. So she had portrayed in her book. Well, she started off making diary entries, and that became a book. It was published in form of a book by her father, who was the only member possibly who had survived the war in respect to the Ottoman family. Okay, he was the only one who survived the war, and later he found the diary, and he decided to publish it in form of a book. Rest is history. Well, this book became one of the world's, best books ever written. Absolutely. It's a saga of a little girl and how she sees the world, how she sees the people around, how she happens to analyze the war. Well, what were her previews and views and opinions about Hitler, the Nazis, and of course, the torture, what the Jews were left exposed to, the fear, what the Jews were left exposed to. In fact, this book helps us to fathom deeper into her and figure out what she happens to think about, education, teenage, people around, a family, friends, life, war, so on and so. So it's massive, absolutely massive. We have an extract from that book, a very tiny little extract from that book. In fact, the extract what you have in your syllabus have been taken from the original book, from the diary of Anne Frank, and sections from that book had been clubbed together to produce this kind of a class. But we need to thank Anne Frank's father, who had ultimately decided to publish it in form of a book, or else we wouldn't have had come to know about this girl's views, her philosophies about life, death, war, people, and so many things. So we have certain excerpts which we will read and which we will talk about. In this class we are just introducing the time, the phase, the history, and all that stuff. Well, we will continue with the discussion.